Well, hi, everyone. This is Daniel Williams, Senior Editor at MGMA and host of the MGMA Podcast Network. We are back with another episode of MGMA Insights today, and joining us is Liz Mahan. She's Director of Professional Development and Solutions at the Association for Advancing Physician and Provider Recruitment. She's also going to be speaking at an upcoming MGMA event. We're going to talk a lot about that today. Liz, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Daniel. I'm so excited to be here with all of you.
Yeah, this is fun. I just got to know you through the events team. I guess they had communicated with you several times, and then I got to read about your background, which I can't wait to talk to you about it. I'm really excited about this.
Uh-oh.
So I'm trying to think of where to start. So let's just start with your professional side. So I mentioned you are Director of Professional Development Solutions at AAPPR, and I told you offline I may stumble over that. I don't want to. I want all of our listeners to know who this association is. So tell us that. Who is AAPPR? What do you guys do?
Yeah, so we are a national professional association for in-house physician recruiters. And
Okay.
what that means is all of our members have some role in the recruiting and retaining of physicians directly for an organization, whether that be a hospital, a multi-specialty organization or practice. We have FQHCs. I mean, it really runs the gamut from organizations that are spread throughout the states and across the country to smaller organizations, maybe a 25-bed critical access hospital that has one recruiter who maybe does recruitment, but also HR and helps with payroll. So, so we really encompass a broad spectrum of professionals in this space.
Yeah. So I want to ask you that then. So there's the recruitment side, but then you also mentioned retention. When you're working with practices, I'm sure it varies practice to practice, but where do they have their biggest challenge? Is it a bigger challenge to do the initial recruitment or a bigger challenge to do the retention once you have somebody in-house? What have you seen? Is there anything? Yeah.
Great question. And if you come to my MGMA session, you will learn more about a word that we like to use called recruit attention. Which basically means recruiting to retain physicians.
Okay.
So we really believe, and one of the best practices that we teach is that retention starts at recruitment. So it really starts with finding the best fit for the practice and for the community. And when we say the best fit, we're not just talking about like the clinical skills that they may bring or the scope of practice that they bring, but also what they're looking for in a lifestyle, how their vision and values aligns with the mission and the values and the vision for the practice. And really finding that sweet spot where we can get alignment culturally, clinically. That's where we find a good fit. And that's where we find someone who really has staying power and isn't going to be looking for a new job in just a couple of years.
Okay. We're gonna take a hard turn to the right here because I want to go into your background, because when I was researching you, I found something here that got me interested for sure, because you have an arts background. In fact, you have an MFA in Theater Arts Management. First of all, what is that? What does that mean? Are you the producer of a stage play? Are you doing props? What is theater arts management? What is that?
Yeah. So my master's really focuses on the business of theater, from management and producing. So all that fun behind the scenes stuff, from contracts to budgets, all that really sexy stuff that everybody talks about when they talk about theater. Believe it or not, there are actually people who do that for a living. They make sure there's money in the bank, that payroll gets done, the bills get paid, everybody has a current contract, and all that fun stuff.
Okay. So that's what threw me for a curve here, is because it's an MFA, and I'm wondering, please explain that aspect of it, because it seems like what you are doing, it sounds more like it's on the MBA side where you're doing all the management and other aspects of a business. You're running a theater company or a particular production in the way that a person would in almost any business if you want it to be successful, like billing collections and marketing and awareness, all the things that take place, payroll. So what do you learn in the MFA program? Did you go into any of the acting, lighting, directing, writing, any of those parts of it as well? Or
we interfaced with all of those folks.
okay.
So I myself am not a playwright or a director or definitely not an actor. We worked closely with them. And on the management side, it's really important to have a good understanding of what they do and what they're bringing to the table. It's theater. I think all artists get, sort of that madcap buzz going around them, that they're maybe a little crazy or a little off center. And it's really important to understand where that comes from and the vision of the lighting designer and the vision of the director, to make sure all those pieces come together and everything is where it needs to be when it needs to be there.
I love it. Well, it's very similar to a medical practice. You need everything where it needs to be when it's needed. And so last question on the theater side, what was your favorite production you either worked on or that you grew up loving? Anything along those lines that you could share with us?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think the favorite show that I worked on, I interned on the play August Osage County. And that's still, I know it's a movie now, but it was a play first.
Sure.
And I think that's still probably one of my most favorite projects, one of the best plays I think I've ever seen or read. It's just a really beautiful piece. So I think that one's pretty near and dear to my heart. Otherwise, you know what? And I say this and people are like, are you kidding me? But Cats was the first musical my parents ever took me to when I was 8 years old. So that, just for sentimental reasons, will also have a very special place in my heart. And theater fans that don't know it, there's actually a revival of Cats. It's called the Jellicle Ball, but it's done a little differently, and it's off Broadway. It's getting a lot of really great buzz. So I know this isn't a Broadway, off-Broadway podcast, but if you're a theater fan and you're in or near New York, I would encourage you to check it out. However you feel about Cats.
Well, I don't know if there's some backlash or criticism has changed about Cats, but I saw it in London in 1987, and I thought it was fantastic. I was a college student and spent a semester abroad and got my playbill signed by one of the cats, and I used to remember the cat's name, and I've totally forgotten it. And I now have a cat who is one of my great teachers. So I love cats. What's wrong with cats? I don't know.
I think because it was around for so long, it just, it kind of, people started to drag it a little bit and poke fun at it. But I don't know. I'm like you. I have good memories of it.
Yeah.
I still kind of like the music too.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I kind of live in, not in the past, but in my own time, so to speak. And so my wife keeps up with all the day-to-day of what's going on in the world, and I'll bring up something and she'll go, that's been canceled, or that people make fun of that now. And I went, really? I didn't know. I actually did not know anything that you're telling me. So ignorance is bliss. Is that the right saying? So,
I know.
Yeah.
I know, it's like in theater, everybody wants to be like the fan of the newest, most cutting edge show that's out there. So I think sometimes, like, if you say something like, oh, my favorite musical is Cats, or my favorit musical is Phantom of the Opera, they're like, really a theater person? Like, you're
probably right. I mean, I guess a real theater person would, look down their nose at it. But I mean, I went to the big ones back in the 80s and whatever. And, Les Mis and Phantom and Cats and
Yeah.
others like that. And then went back to, I've got a daughter who's 19. And so then we saw Les Mis much, much more recently and saw Wicked and
Yep.
enjoyed all of those. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not enough of a theater person to know the obscure, plays that are out there. So.
I like to look at theater and the arts that the more that can be out there for everybody, the better it is.
Right.
Everybody has different tastes. If we turn on cable, not everybody is going to be watching sports or reality TV. We all have different tastes. So I love it when theater can just meet people where they're at and give them, whatever they need, whether that's just pure fun for 2.5 hours or a deep think. They're finding something for everyone is really the magical thing about
I
theater.
totally agree. And for all of you MGMA listeners, thank you for having our theater moment here. This is Liz's background, and I did want to ask her because here's the question. How do you make that transition? You were in theater, you have your MFA there, and then
Yep.
suddenly you're in physician recruitment. What precipitated that? How did that transition work for you? Tell us about that.
Oh, well, I guess this is where we're going to get real.
Yeah.
The short answer is I completely burnt out.
Okay.
I tell physicians that I've worked with, I can really relate to them, even though I never went to medical school. Theater was one of those things that happened 7 days a week. It happened extra on holidays and long weekends. When I was working in New York, I would have shows on Broadway, off Broadway, maybe on a national tour, which meant they were in a completely different time zone. So it really became a 24/7 kind of thing. And there is a tendency to really burn out, when you're shooting for the stars and working to get ahead. And that's exactly what happened to me. And I burnt out and I was in my early mid 30s, which meant I had a long career ahead of me in the workforce and
Yeah.
not really any direction in terms of where to go. And then a few things happened kind of all at once. I met my husband, who was also working in theater, but he was working on the technical side. He was also getting burnt out. He decided to leave and go back to school to get a degree in mechanical engineering, which took us out of New York City, which meant I couldn't work in theater anymore because I wasn't going to be in the city. I was going to be about 3 hours upstate in upstate New York. And then I had to find another job to pay the bills and keep our lights on while my husband went back to school. And for the first time in my roughly 34 years on this planet, I listened to my mother, who was a healthcare executive. She worked in human resources at a large upstate New York teaching hospital.
Okay.
She saw the posting for a physician recruiter, and I had told her, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to do something very different from what I'm doing now. I don't think I want to be in the arts. I think I want to do something that maybe is a little bit more human interest, a little bit closer to home. So she saw the posting for my job and she sent it to me and said, I think you should apply. You might really like it. I listened to her. I was right to listen to her. Maybe I should have listened to her before I turned 34. but she hit the nail on the head that time. And the rest is history. And I ended up working for 5 years for a smaller community hospital in Western Massachusetts as an in-house physician recruiter for them. And then this job sort of, I guess I found it. It found me. Okay. It was posted and I said, why not apply? And here I am. I started in this role at the association in, wait for it, March of 2020.
Wow.
A date that will live in infamy
Good
for
timing.
everybody. And 4 years later, I just love what I do.
That's wonderful. So talk about being Director of Professional Development and Solutions at AAPPR. What's your day-to-day look like? What are you involved in?
Yeah. So I do all of the educational things for our members. Unlike the theater arts, where there seems to be a degree or a training program for every aspect of it, there's really not any kind of formal university or college education for somebody to go through to be a physician recruiter. Typically, you land in a role as a physician recruiter because you possess soft skills that people like. You're a people person, you're organized, you're detail oriented, you can multitask, things like that. And from there, you sort of grow the hard skills that you need to be successful. So a lot of what I do is working on things like webinars and tools and resources, articles, blogs, helping a little bit with research, all of those things that people who are in the profession need to build the skills if they're new or keep up with the skills if they've been in it for a while.
I think we mentioned it earlier, but you're going to be in front of the MGMA audience. It's going to be August 15th and 16th is the conference. It's our staffing conference. It's our first time we've ever had the staffing conference. So we're really excited about that. That's going to be in Massachusetts. Your topic is creating your provider recruitment playbook. Tell us about that. What is a provider recruitment playbook? What does that look like?
So I came up with this topic because it's a question I get asked a lot. Why can't you just give me something that will show me how to recruit? Give me what I need to recruit the doctors that I need. And my answer is always, if only it were that easy. Every doctor, every practice, every organization is different. Recruiting is more tactical than process-based. So what this presentation is going to look at is how to really identify what you need in a candidate, both clinically, interpersonally, in terms of their interests, their career trajectory, where they hope to see their practice growing, so that we can do that word I used at the beginning of this podcast, that recruit attention, so that we can find the candidates who have the staying power to be with a practice for years and years to come and really reduce that turnover. We know retention is so important. Turnover is expensive. It impacts patient access. It impacts patient satisfaction. It just has so many downstream effects if somebody leaves a practice. So we're really going to take a look at what practices, what organizations can do before they even start to meet with candidates to make sure that they have a playbook that's going to address all of the needs of the practice and really hone in on what makes the ideal candidate. Because I'll tell you, the ideal candidate does exist, but rather than kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping it sticks, my Italian grandmother would be happy with that analogy.
Yes.
What we're going to do is really focus in on what we need so that we can be strategic about our search process and our interview process.
Okay. You said something in there that was really interesting to me, and I want to make sure I understand it. You said this recruitment is more tactical than process oriented. Did I get that right? And if I did, tell me, what does that mean? I'm not sure. Yeah. So there's not just step by step. You don't go step 1, 2, 3, 4, or what do you do?
There is. A process, though, is something everybody can follow. Okay. I can give any practice a checklist of, first you place the ad, then you look at CVs, then you do an interview.
Right.
That's the process is going to generally be the same for everyone. What we're talking about is everything that happens even before you get to that process. So really being strategic about what we're looking for in a candidate, being really very honest and realistic about where practices are individually. So where are they in terms of their culture? Where are they in terms of their vision for growth in the future? And then how does the ideal candidate fit into that? So I'll give a little teaser. One example I give is really looking at the makeup of the practice. So what providers do we have now? Do we have physicians that specialize in one particular area and now we're looking for a generalist? Or are we in a specialty practice that has a lot of subspecialists? And, what we need is sort of that bread and butter provider to see all of those sort of more general cases. Are we looking for somebody who can lead a practice? Or are we looking for somebody earlier in the career who can really build their practice and grow into a leadership role? So really taking all of those little more nuanced things into account rather than just looking at that, that checklist that we have that says, first I place an ad, then I interview, then I make an offer. So, we're going to dive more into what happens on the front end in this presentation, and talk about how that can really positively impact your recruitment process by creating that playbook.
Right. And then as part of the playbook, do you get into the timeline and do the practices know the timeline that it's going to take? What is it, 18 months, 2 years? What is y'all's statistic you use as far as the timeline?
It really varies depending on the region, depending on the specialty. It can be pretty broad. We will talk about the timeline. We will talk about how it's really important that everybody be on the same page around the timeline, that we be proactive about our timelines, that we try to get away from, a more urgent response, more reactive response, and build a pipeline in a more proactive way, and really spend some time doing some medical staff planning and looking at where the practice is going, maybe where we need to look at recruiting in the coming years and months, and getting out of the, reacting to sort of what's happening in terms of turnover and stuff. Because ultimately we want to recruit to retain. So we want to really manage that turnover and hopefully mitigate it in the long run.
Let's talk about common challenges then. You talk to a lot of practices, you help them find these solutions using this playbook, but when they come to you, I just want to see if our listeners, are nodding their head when you say whatever you're going to say. What is the common challenge that they're saying, Liz, help me with fill in the blank?
Yeah, Liz, help me. I need an X specialist yesterday.
Okay.
I didn't even put this in my presentation because we all know there's a physician shortage. We all know it's getting worse. I don't think that bears repeating. What we need to start doing to address it is to try to get ahead of it and to really try to recruit to retain instead of just finding that person who can fill that immediate need. I mean, that's great. It's great if we find a physician that can come in and do the job. But if the physician's not the right fit, if the physician, maybe isn't a right fit for the community because they love fishing and hiking and you're in suburbia where all those things are an hour drive away, how happy are they going to be, in the long run? If they have a spouse that's looking for work in a particular field that isn't available in the area and they either have a long commute or they're looking for a remote opportunity that may or may not be available, how does that work in the long run? So taking all of those things into account, again, to find that physician that's really going to have staying power and will be with the practice long term.
Okay. Now, when I went to y'all's website and started doing some research on your organization, I saw a couple of things in there. One of them that caught my eye was this credential, CPRP DEI. You have that after your name. I know what DEI is, but I didn't know in this context. So tell us about this credential, what it means, and how important DEI in healthcare recruitment is, and what strategies practices can use to have an inclusive and diverse workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. So the CPRP credential is the Certified Physician and Provider Recruitment Professional. And that's our professional certification that we offer through the association.
Okay.
In 2022, we then launched a micro certification available to anybody who had the CPRP credential already. And that is specifically in diversity recruitment. So looking at strategies to bring in that diverse workforce to your organization. Studies have shown, we know that patients have higher satisfaction when they have providers who understand their culture, they understand their background. We want to hire providers that mirror the population that they're working with that can really relate to them on a multitude of levels. We also know that diverse workplaces, they have higher employee satisfaction, they have better productivity. It's just so important in so many areas. And, from there, you can really talk about disparities in healthcare and, inequality when it comes to caring for patients and for different populations. So it really is just so important to have diversity front of mind. And again, really being mindful of how you're recruiting and what the composition of your workforce looks like and how everybody really fits into that healthcare ecosphere that we create within our healthcare systems.
Okay, very cool. Well, before we leave then, what can you tell me about your own work-life balance? You got burned out in theater. You went into healthcare where there's burnout here. So what do you do to better regulate yourself, to enjoy life, to give yourself some space where possible?
Yeah, right out of the fire and right out of the frying pan into the fire.
I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? I have learned it's so important to have hobbies. Mm-hmm. Hobbies really do get you out of the office and encourage you to do things that take your mind away from work. So after my husband and I moved to Western Massachusetts, we bought some property. We have a little farm with livestock. Okay. We have goats and sheep and donkeys and dogs and geese and chickens. So they all need our help. I ride horses, so they definitely need my care on a daily basis. I'm an avid reader. I love to needlepoint. So, really finding things that take you out of your desk. And I will say, I now work remotely. I work from home full time. The siren call of the computer is very real. Mm-hmm. We tell ourselves, I will just go in for a minute to do this one thing, and 3 hours later, we're emerging. Yes. So I have found that having an office with a door that I can close and not look at when I'm not in the office and working is really important. So, just trying to take care of yourself and have work be the thing you do to live and not your whole life.
That's beautifully said. Well, Liz Mahan, thanks for joining us on the MGMA Insights Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Daniel. It's great to meet you.
You too. So that is going to do it for this episode of MGMA Insights. As we mentioned, Liz will be speaking at the Staffing Conference. That's August. Don't get ahead of myself. It's August 15th and 16th. in Massachusetts. In the episode show notes, I will put direct links to it, or you can just type in mgma.com/events. It'll pop up on your screen. You can click right through and register and go see Liz in person. Until then, thank all of you for being MGMA Insights listeners.